Fighter! The Shoryuken! The Shoryuken!
Street Fighter is my life.
We love Street Fighter! I play it like every day.
Hadouken! Tiger! I love this game so much. Sonic Boom? Flash Kick?
We love you, Street Fighter.
I'm Balrog.
I love Street Fighter so much.
Fire all the way. Woohoo!
Ooh ah! You lose.
今からで言うともう本当に6年7年前まで遡らないといけないんですけども、その時にはもうブームを復活させるっていう形の気持ちよりかはやはり一代一世紀のこうストリートファイターのそのですね認知度を広めたストリートファイター2の人たちにもう一度戻ってもらってファイティングゲームをプレイしてもらいたいっていう気持ちの方が先だったので、まさかここまでこの世界中的にこうブームっていうかすごくポピュラーに変わってくるっていうところまでは予想もしてませんでしたし、望んでもいなかったっていうのが正直なところです。
Street Fighter, to video games is kind of like Star Wars to movies. Everybody recognized this as a pioneer, as the breaking point of fighting game being something totally different than just doing the pew, pew.
I remember playing Street Fighter 1, seeing fireballs come out of Ryu and Ken's hands for the first time was just amazing. I just never would have thought of something that crazy. Around 91, I just remember saying, wow, they actually made a sequel to my favorite game.
Arcade machines were actually against city ordinance in the town where I grew up, so I had to work a little harder than most to get to the arcades. And my brother tipped me off. He's like, oh, there's this crazy new game and everyone's crowding around it. You should go check it out.
Street Fighter 2, I mean, that game created a genre. What are you playing at Street Fighter? Because it was the only one.
My first experience with Street Fighter was actually in a convenience store.
At 7-Eleven.
At a Safeway.
Super Nintendo.
A fish and chip shop.
Going to the arcade.
There was a Street Fighter 2 machine there, and
this thing was stuffed into the corner, and
nobody knew what they were doing.
There was this electricity in the air. You wanted to beat the person. You wanted to see what they were capable of.
From the beginning, I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be at the front of that line.
It immediately caught my attention because it had 6 buttons. So it just seemed something that was more complicated and just on another level.
So every lunchtime, we had money that we were supposed to be spending our food on, and very quickly, the amount of food we were buying for lunch started dwindling as we would spend more and more quarters on playing Street Fighter 2 with our friends. So I was malnourished because of Street Fighter.
I was in love from the first moment I saw it.
I started really getting into Street Fighter around the time Street Fighter Alpha came out. During high school, I used to go over to my friend Johnny's place where he was really big into Street Fighter, and he was sort of like my Goken, where he would teach me everything. Eventually, I got my first Street Fighter game, which was Street Fighter EX. I then got Street Fighter Collection. They had Super Street Fighter 2, 2 Turbo, and Street Fighter Alpha 2 Gold. And then so I kept going. I kept getting more and more Street Fighter games until eventually I was like, I have more games than I am missing. I'm just gonna keep going and see where this goes, and this is what happened. Many times when people see my collection, they would ask me, hey, why are these Mega Man games there? Why is this and that there when they're not Street Fighter games? I try to collect as many games that have Street Fighter character cameos, Street Fighter special moves in them. They have to be something actually visual. Everything from music and art and characters, this all is why Street Fighter is where it is today. There's a couple of interesting things in my collection. The Street Fighter Look and Find book, which is pretty much like Where's Waldo, but with a Street Fighter spin to it. A complete set of Tatsunoko vs. Capcom collectible trading cards. The Street Fighter watch. Street Fighter Valentine's Day cards. A really old school Street Fighter 2 card game. A Delta Wing kite, which I don't have the heart to ever open. A couple of Street Fighter PC titles, including the Commodore 64 version. a Street Fighter 2 board game, which I am very, very tempted to open. What other games do I have? I don't even know, I have a lot of games. My favorite game in my collection is Card Fighters Clash for Neo Geo Pocket. The whole point of the game is to collect Street Fighter and SNK cards and be the biggest collector. So that's, you know, right down my alley. I don't think I'll ever stop collecting. Street Fighter is such a huge series and it's so successful that I think that honestly we're going to see a Street Fighter 9 or a Street Fighter 12, and you know, if I'm still alive, then I'll have those games and all the different variants and everything. I love the series so much, and hopefully one day, maybe my stuff will be in a museum or I could pass it on to my children.
Hey Charles, you got a combat cut? Kind of break it down. Right down like this. Alright, ready to go. I can break it down. I can break it down like whatever you want. Break it down.
First experience with Street Fighter was that I was stuck in the Philippines and everyone was playing, and we would play all the time. Like we would scratch, play Street Fighter, scratch, play Street Fighter. And so I got pretty good at Ken. And so I just stuck with him. I figured like, it's kind of with scratching, if I just stick with one turntable my whole life, I'll get really good instead of like halving my time with two turntables. Yeah, it's totally in me. It's like faking and the reflexes. My favorite one was the one where you put in the code and then it was just like turbo, like 10 stars. Your spirit is vibrating at such a high rate. And your brain is working at a different dimension. Yeah, I made my first mixtape. It was called Demolition Pumpkin Squeeze Music. I put all these sound effects of Street Fighter in there, and I scratched them and stuff, and you know, put that in my mixtape. And everyone was like, "Oh, I like the Street Fighter part of the whole tape. I don't like the rest of it, but I like that part." In the video game, there's this area, like the options, you can hear all the sound effects, and I just take them, put it in my little sampler, and throw them into the music.
当時は全部効果音もボイスも私がやっていたので、背景の効果音もすごく楽しく作らせてもらったんですけれども、パンチとかキックとかの音がすごくこだわりが、企画の方がこだわりがあったので、ものすごくボツをいっぱい食らってたくさんパンチとキックの音を取りました。結構音楽が入るのがちょっとゲームができてからのことが多かったので、ストリートファイターもちょっとできてる時である程度動くものがあって、で背景とかもほぼこんな感じでできますっていうのが決まってて、でそれをほぼ全部見せていただいて始めるような感じでした。背景を見た時に最初、もちろん音楽も考えなきゃいけないんですけども、それよりも効果音がすごく面白いのをこのお風呂だとなんかこうエコーがかかっててほしいとか、チュンリーだと自転車の音が鳴っててほしいとか、そのダルシンのところだと象が鳴いててほしいとか、なんかそういうのをすごく考えるのが楽しくて。
What's the story of Street Fighter, Eric?
It's basically the story about Ryu,
Chun-Li,
Dalsum,
Blanca,
Ryu, trying to be the best fighter in the world.
And yeah, he is like the stock fighter, but he's this kid who knows the most violent martial art in the world, but he's using it to better himself.
Each character has their own motive, they have their own relationships and everything. They come from different places around the world.
You pick your character, where you're coming from, and then you travel around the world finding all the best people.
Ryu goes around from town to town by airplane. Right, the menu has him going around in the airplane, but he's actually walking in all the cutscenes.
Ryu is a struggle of him versus evil Ryu, you know, the Satsuno Hodo and everything. Ken, he's fighting for his family now.
Ken, he's flashy, he's everything Ryu is not, and that's why people gravitate to him because, oh, it's Ryu but with an attitude. And then you have Sagat, who's this powerhouse. Guile is just over-the-top American.
The characters are icons in a lot of ways. Some say stereotypes, but that comes close to iconography in a lot of ways.
Dalsim's origin was that he ate spicy curry and that's why he could shoot fire.
There's something really resonant and powerful about all these character types. None of them sort of own the story, so I think you can find part of yourself in one of the Street Fighter characters somehow.
And then eventually you get to M. Bison, and then you defeat him, and then you're the king of the world. You defeated everybody. You're the best.
That's Street Fighter.
We started Udon about 11 years ago. Everybody in the studio is like big Street Fighter fans. The dream project is to do a Street Fighter book.
In the original games, there's so little backstory to glean from.
We look at all the endings and we try to figure out how we can actually, group it together.
And when we had to take dozens of characters and pull them all together into one continuity and make the comic series, you have to pick a few characters and focus on their stories and make sure that it pays off in a way that makes sense. Everyone's got their favorites, and you don't want anyone to be left out of that, grand storyline that we're putting together.
I've been working with Long for 12, 13 years. We've become really close friends, and his take on characters, I always feel that there's this great energy to it.
I actually started my art career in graphic design, doing brochures for hard drives. One day I just quit my job and went to Comic-Con with a couple of friends. We formed a comic studio. Through that, I met the head of Udon, Eric Ko, and they were like, hey, they're gonna remake Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. That was kind of like a dream project, to be working on a game, at the same time working on this really beloved franchise as well. We started by just up-resing the original sprites and then trying to draw directly over them.
I think the toughest part, is to actually making sure that the character with the added detail looks cool, as well as falls into the frame, the silhouette of the character, of the sprite. We have to conform to that shape in order for the hit zone to work.
We decided to pick a recognizable style from Street Fighter and run with that.
Remember, there's this art style change between Street Fighter 2 and Alpha, when Alpha is really, stylized and, it's less realistic in terms of, proportion. Especially Bison is being bulked up more, in Alpha, which looks really cool. But if you go back and look at the original M. Bison, he's like a pretty skinny guy. Everybody remembers Bison as this bulky, evil, dictator, and we kind of want to have that look. We have to do a lot of different things. For example, in his standing pose, we actually kind of tilt him a little bit more so that he's not as thick. We kind of fudge it a little bit on arm muscles, on the shoulder pads, so we can kind of cheat on those. It's a big challenge, for us to do that over 1,000 frames of Bison and make it look cool.
I had to animate the characters when it does the 10-0 countdown, when they're all beat up and bloody and bruised faced. There's nothing better than sitting there spending days at a time trying to make it look like a character is going to do dry heave as they're tilting back and forth, doing the You get paid to do this. That's a pretty good job, I think.
Yeah.
0.
Cosplay is when you dress up as an existing character. I cosplay Ryu, Evil Ryu, Guy, and maybe more characters in the future. I try to be as loyal to the character as possible. When I made my costume, I didn't cut the sleeves off the shoulders. I would actually tear them and wear red gloves and a red bandana. I even touch on my eyebrows so that, they have the points at the end, because that's what people recognize. And after that, I would roll around in dirt because that's how the character would have been. his costume's dirty. If I am Ryu, I'll walk around a convention not smiling as much unless I have like a Ken or a Sakura walking around with me. In the end, everyone has their own reasons for cosplaying, and it's all about expressing yourself, showing your love for the character, and having fun.
Street Fighter is really, really innovative on a lot of different levels. The characters are so well thought out and they're so clear and iconic. The minute that you see those characters, they have personality imbued in that design. The way they move, the type of maneuvers that they have reflect who they are as people, as characters.
The original 8 characters, like their color palettes were like just so like well chosen. There was like that meme going around where it's like you see like 5 boxes of color and it's like, okay, that's Ryu, okay, that's Chun-Li, okay, that's Blanca. That's also a testament to the design as well, like how iconic these characters are.
The characters in Street Fighter are so distinctive visually, right? Each character, if you were to just isolate as a silhouette, they look very, very distinctive. You would never mistake Dhalsim for Blanca or E Honda for Ryu. They've got such individualized shapes.
There's a personality to the game that a lot of other games don't have. Like when you see Ryu, you immediately feel something. There's such strong archetypes and personalities. It's not quite cartoonish, and it's not quite adult. It's this really good middle ground.
There's 2 main things. There's people who play like Street Fighter as like, you know, very competitively, and then there's people who really appreciate the artistic side of it, the creative side of it, the world building that Capcom did.
It was the intricate backgrounds at that time. Every stage is a different territory in the world, is a different country. Like you're not only looking at the gameplay, you're looking at a piece of art.
It's frankly filled with a ton of great art. It's filled with a ton of great characters. It's filled with a ton of great music. And you know, greatness I think inspires greatness in others. Different people with different kinds of abilities find their own way to connect with the game.
The music from games, the 8-bit sound is like my foundation of what sounds good. I still appreciate 8-bit today. Like if you take a modern song today and put it in 8-bit, I might like it more than the actual song. Because there's something about the 8-bit that's very nostalgic. There's a producer named Salen Strayer, he's based in Virginia. He was sending me some beats and it goes back to the retro sounds. Like he sent me Gigaton Punch and I'm like, this is Street Fighter right here.
Gigaton Punch, hey, Gigaton Punch, okay, Gigaton Punch, yeah, Gigaton Punch.
To explore the universe of it the way that I would do as a child, but I explore it through music so that other people can hear this story, this side of the story.
I hit the gym about 6 days a week to hit the punching bag to keep my jab from getting weak. I jump the jump rope to build speed with my feet. See, you gotta be in shape in order to be great. I got the blue shorts with the matching blue vest. White tank top, yo, I keep it so fresh. Can't nobody stop me, cuz they get knocked once they get socked by my boxing gloves.
After I analyzed the game even further, I found a parallel between Balrog and myself. In the music industry, I'm considered the underdog in the sense that I don't have like huge shows yet. I don't have like a crazy following or anything like that. When I was growing up, Balrog, like no one ever picked him. He was just there. It was like, okay, you're on the game, yeah, but no one picks you. Then I started to think, why doesn't anyone pick Balrog? Well, for one, his haircut's messed up. No, but he didn't have any kicks. He didn't have any fireballs.
Got too much power to get tired. All these other fighters is cowards with fireballs. But Balrog don't need it. I rock their jaw. They get defeated by this raw southpaw.
When you play someone that's really good with them, you see that though there's that handicap in a sense, when they know what they're doing, that same person that's considered weak is actually one of the most powerful characters in the game. So I could relate to that. To distance myself from video games would be to distance myself from myself, which would make me a liar. I wouldn't be staying true to who I am as a person. It still inspires me to this day. I'll never like abandon that, never.
僕がとても重要だと思ってるのは、これを言ったらみんなのそんなの当たり前じゃないかってみんなが言うことなんですけど、その当たり前を作ったのがすごいですね。例えば、もちろんこうキャラクター同士が左右の画面に分かれて対峙している、これは当たり前なんですけど、それ以前にストリートファイター以前にもあったと思うんですけど、やっぱりライフバーって言われるものをお互いちゃんと持って、 あれをちゃんと削り合って勝敗を決めましょう。
格闘ゲームのすごいところというか特別なところはやっぱり、試合時間が割と短い。その短い試合の時間の中で勝敗がはっきりと決まるっていうところだと思いますね。
これほど僕は逆にシビアなゲームはないと思ってるんで、このシビアさが逆に私はすごくスペシャルだと思ってます。それストリートファイターは今も昔も変わらず格闘ゲームがそうですけど、ずっと最初からそのいわゆるキャラクターが登場して対戦してローディングが入って別のステージに行ってキャラクターが対峙する演出が入って対戦してローディングが入ってて、このいわゆるゲームのシーケンス、格闘ゲームのシーケンスって言われる基本の流れ、これみんな見落としがちですけど、今もそれまでそういうゲームってほとんどなかったんで、その流れを作ったのは間違いなくストリートファイターで、他の今までのゲームの概念には全くなかったこと。
Street Fighter 1 to me is almost unplayable in like a sort of a competitive way. As a single player game, it's got some cool stuff.
I really love that game. Some people call it a really bad game. I can see where they're saying it's a bad game, but I just think it was awesome.
One of the core geniuses of Street Fighter is the fireball as an innovation. Not only is it a great move that finds its way as a motion into a lot of other games, but the idea of a fireball in the abstract is a way of expanding fighting games beyond just punching and kicking. Now we can do combat meaningfully across the screen. External vectors of attack, something outside of your own body that's happening that helps control space on the screen and forces a certain kind of activity from your opponent.
やっぱジャンプして飛び道具をこう避けて、で、逆に言うとそのジャンプに対しての対空技があって、でそのジャンプでとにかく何とか飛び込むっていうところを起点にする戦略っていう、いろいろ格闘ゲームとしての根本的なシステムの発明っていうのは多分もう一つ大きい、重要な要素だと思うんですけど、
すごくよくできたじゃんけんぽん、スリリングなっていう感じ。
In the early days of Street Fighter 2, before there was the internet, the only way to learn things was to go to a neighboring arcade and then just see what people were doing there. Things would just happen out of the blue, like, Ryu would throw a dragon punch. The game stopped, both players stopped playing and say, how did you do that?
And then there would be like legends about this one guy who could do the spinning pile driver like when he wanted to. Like for everyone else, it was just like, nah, I'm gonna mash things and then hopefully spinning pile driver will come out. And this guy could just do it. Like he could just choose now, spinning pile driver, and it would come out.
僕は最初竜を使ったと覚えてます。それはなんでかっていうと、みんな昇竜拳が出せないっていうのをみんなですごい悩んでて、一番最初に昇竜拳誰が出せるんだろうっていうのをみんなで競い合ってたんですよ。
The first time that we were able to figure out how to do a dragon punch, we got it horribly wrong. And the only way we could reproduce it was by holding forward on the stick to walk forward for about 3 seconds and then quickly do a fireball, right? Which is the wrong motion, it's not even close. But it worked for us, so we thought that's how the game worked. When you finally like learn a special move and you understand how it works and like, oh, this is the way it works. It's like kind of a moment where you feel like you have like some secret knowledge now, right? Because back then you were one of a few people who knew that. First there's the power of having the move, right? And then there's the power of them knowing that you know how to do the move and they don't, which is just a great psychological trick.
で2ではそれを全てのキャラクターが対人で使える、プレイヤー同士が扱えるキャラクターになってたんで、先ほど説明したように1でいい部分をちゃんと増幅2でできてるわけなんですけども、それがストリートファイターを本当にメジャーにする一つのきっかけになったと思います。
It's really remarkable to me how much Street Fighter 2 has in common with Street Fighter 1. The moves in Street Fighter 1 are just super hard.
The damage that those moves did were just ridiculous. You could get hit by one Shoryuken and die. 3 fireballs, if you got hit by that, you're pretty much dead.
Hadoken, Shoryuken, like these moves are basically impossible because they're super frame accurate, and they actually relax some of that timing into Street Fighter 2, giving you a few more frames to hit the button as you were doing the quarter circle forward motion. It just made it a little bit more possible to do that fireball. It also had all sorts of interesting unintended consequences like the combo engine.
Combos in Street Fighter 2 were a glitch.
Street Fighter 1 didn't really have combos. The only combos that you got were from like performing a Shoryuken that did like 2 or 3 hits.
Those same kind of lax inputs allowed you to begin like a standing fierce punch and be able to cancel that with a fireball, which was less a calculated work of genius than it was sort of a natural effect of these loosened inputs and the ability to execute the special moves more easily.
その通常技をキャンセルして必殺技を出すっていうシステムっていうのは、多分当時としてはかなり斬新だったし、今どのゲームを見てもそれが基本となっているので。
That mechanic alone, like it's almost impossible to say how much that has carried over and affected every fighting game since then.
最後は必殺技で決めるとか、弱い技から強い技に流れていくようなコンボだとか、それが何段、要はチェーンコンボだとか、2ヒット3ヒット4ヒットみたいなそういうコンボっていうようなものを多分一番最初に要は形システムとしたのが多分ストリートファイター2だと思うんですけれども、これが一番今でもそのスタイル、はありますし、もう今コンボがないゲームはほとんどないので。
ストリートファイターが一番やっぱり人間同士戦うのが一番楽しいんだっていうことを気づかせてくれたということが一番大きいと思いますね。普遍の真理だと思うんですよね。それは何でかというと、人間はやっぱり柔らかいから、頭もそれからなんていうんですか、その感性もその時の体の調子で変わったりするじゃないですか。同じ人がやってもそういうさまざまな変化が人間ほど多様なものはないんですよね。それがプレーに反映されるんで、ゲームの主流っていうかその考え方を変えたきっかけにストリートファイターがなったと思いますね。
大体日本のデベロッパーのどこもワンタイトルは確実に格闘ゲームを作ってるってぐらいの状況が出来上がった。これ間違いなくストリートファイターから始まった現象なんです。
ストリートファイターは僕バーチャファイターっていうゲームを作ろうとして、その時セガっていう会社に勤めてまして、でセガでやっぱりファイティングゲームのヒットがあんまりそこまでなくて、それでファイティングゲームにやっぱりこう力を入れていきたいということがあって、特に意識したことないんですけど、バーチャファイター1の時本当に1のアキラの顔を見て、竜と似てますかね、なんかすごいこんな顔してそれで格闘ゲームで一番ヒットしてるもの、素晴らしいものなんだろうっていうことを調べてたら、まずじゃあストリートファイター2だろうっていうことで。
Play it was a real investment. So there was a literal investment of money, but then also in going to the arcades, there was a time investment. Like I traveled to be here and I came to play this game. And the fact that I know how to throw fireballs and can do combos and things like that shows a legacy of hours, hundreds of hours, thousands of hours of investment in this game. So when I lost, I can't just shrug it off and be like, oh, whatever. Like, it's not whatever. You spent thousands of hours practicing this game.
その人に対決したら挑みたい、もしくは、その人からとプレーすることで学びたいって人は、100円を持って、コインを持って並んで、そのコインが積まれていくんですよ。次僕の順番になってコインが積まれていったり横に並べていかれたりとか。
Even the simple act of someone going up to the game and putting their quarter, you know, in the window, like I got next. You see someone do that and then you look at them, you're like, okay, it's the next competitor. I don't know, there's something about that in itself that's just so great.
I remember there was the top dog in the arcade. He was sort of this villainous character who wouldn't talk to anybody and would sort of snicker and like make little noises under his breath when you pick your character or anything like that. The first time I didn't just beat that guy, but I beat him and I knew I had his number. I was like, oh, I know what you're gonna do. I know all of your next moves. And I beat him and I beat him again and I beat him so many times that he had to go back to the change machine, and that was it. And I knew, like, I got that guy. I know what it is to crush somebody. I know what it is to have figured somebody out. And somebody who formerly was a guy I struggled to get even one win against or to beat at all is now no longer capable of touching me. Like, I have moved to another level where he is no longer able to beat me.
ゲームセンターの現場が熱い時代でしたね。大体やっぱりハメというか同じような技でずっとしつこく投げてくるとかそういうことがあるとみんな台を蹴ってましたね。筐体をドーンって蹴る。だから当時はゲームセンター意外とその筐体をドーンって蹴るってことが結構響いていて、あとストリートファイターも僕もやってますけどよくこう灰皿がとか直接的な喧嘩はそんなにないんですけど日本人の場合は結構こう物を投げ合ったりそのキャビネットを挟んで蹴り合うか物を投げ合うっていう。
The arcade, it was nobody's house. Anybody could come in there. It was every race. It was poor kids. It was rich kids. It was kids that were in gangs. It was kids that were in the military. It was kids that were in computer science programs at school. All these people from different walks of life finding ways to get those kinds of aspects of their personality into the game made the whole ecosystem just incredibly rich and incredibly thrilling to me. So not only was I getting to play great matches against people who had thought of the game in a totally different way than I had ever thought of it, I also got to hang out with them as friends and learn about different people's ideas about life and the way they thought about the world. And they're just awesome people. So that's really what bonded me to the scene. It was an amazing game, but it was amazing people all around the game.
Justin, nerves of steel, man. I don't know how you hold it down like that. That was incredible.
Justin Wong, I think I've known since he was 13 years old or something like that, which is almost creepy.
Well, that was like my first fighting game I ever played in like the beginning of my life. And at the time, I was playing with my elementary school friends, and you know we were just playing, and it was like, okay, this is pretty fun because you're playing with another person. I was never really good at the fighting games. I just know how to like just cheese people out. Pick like Bison and just like hold back and do side pressure from screen to screen to screen away. So I didn't know what I was doing at all. I was just like, okay, this looks really cheap and overpowered. You know, I just started going secretly without telling my family, you know, okay, after school, after 3 o'clock, I get off school. Yeah, I'm going to the after school program and stuff like that. But really, I'm going to an arcade to spend like 50 cents a day.
He was sort of one of these phenomenon kids. Somebody that really grew up in the fighting game scene and was born into it.
I had to be home at like 6 p.m. One day, my parents, like on a Friday, my parents were like, oh yeah, you know, we're gonna have a banquet in Chinatown, so they're gonna have like a dinner there. So I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna go hang out with my friends. So I eventually stay out there. When it was like 7 o'clock, a lot of the adults that gets off work came to play, and then they were really amazing good. They just beat the crap out of me. And then the token guy was like, those are like real tournament players, and they actually play in tournaments, and they're considered the best in the United States. And I'm like, that exists? I never knew they can take video games seriously in like sports.
まあそのファイティングゲームっていうテーマそのものが人間の根源的欲求ですよね。こう誰かとこう競い合って優劣を決めたいっていうスポーツの世界でもそうですけれども、一番象徴的なのがやっぱりそのファイティングっていうテーマだと思うんですよね。
I love sports. I love sports competition, but those kind of games immediately disqualify a huge percentage of potential players because you're just too short to play basketball or you're not big enough to play football, whatever it might be. So Street Fighter opens the door to a lot more people. It capitalizes on sort of the best elements of chess in terms of strategy and thinking and creating these situations and creating these combinations, not just in terms of a literal combo, but setting your opponent up, trying to put them in a position where you can grind them down and take advantage of a positional situation, but also of games like poker, which is really all about reading the mind of your opponent at its top level. So poker has all this variance and these elements of luck, and it's only by playing 1,000 games of poker that you can really tell necessarily who's the better poker player. But in Street Fighter, if you're the better player, there's really almost no element of luck whatsoever. So if I'm good at reading my opponent, I can take great advantage of that. It's sort of this great mix of fear and emotion and mind reading and strategy and and great physical execution, and so it has these elements of all these great competitive games rolled up into one.
The worst thing that I ever hear is when people say, oh, you're just mashing buttons. If you see a Sports Center highlight of Kobe Bryant doing some round the back and dunk, you're just like, that's amazing. And no one has to play basketball, but you're just going to assume that was amazing because it just looks hard to do. But when you watch someone do something crazy in a fighting game, a lot of people don't know what it was that they did. I just want to get it to that point where you're like, oh, it's like Kobe Bryant doing a dunk. You just know exactly why it's great.
And I spent another whole summer just like coming in the morning at 10 a.m. and like leaving at 5 p.m. And then one Saturday, there was just like a ton of people. I'm like, why are there so many people here at 10 a.m.? No one's here at 10 a.m. And they're like, oh, we're going to a tournament in New Jersey. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And they're like, do you want to come? And I was like, I don't know. I'm not too sure. I went anyway because I'm thinking, oh, tournaments, they shouldn't last that long, right? I spent the whole day there and the whole night. And then my parents are calling me like, where are you? What are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm gonna stay at my friend's house. And they're like, no, we want you to come back home. And I'm like, oh, I can't because I'm in New Jersey. And then they're like, oh, you're gonna be so much in trouble when you get back home. I was like, oh man, I better make it count. I went from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast for tournaments. It was hard to find a lot of excuses to stay out for the weekends because it was like a weekend thing. Like if I'm in California, I'm like, yeah, I'm like doing something with my friend in New Jersey, so I'm not gonna be home for like until Monday because I'm like 15, right? So why will you're gonna let your 15-year-old son travel from New York to California for a tournament? Yeah, that's not gonna happen, right? Without a guardian. So I went there without no guardian. Just went there with my straight arcade friends and let's see what happens. And I won the tournament. They're like, here's your prize. It was like $1,000. And I was like, wow, I never seen this much money in my life as a 15-year-old. So I was like, damn, I traveled pretty far. My parents still don't know. They frown on you playing video games. Don't play video games. Don't even go outside. Just study, go to college. That's it, right?
By the time I got to college, the internet had sort of picked up a little bit of steam. I found people around the world who had the same bad attitude that I did. They were like, oh, I'm the best. And you're like, shut up, I'm the best. And you hear rumblings about there's these players in California who are really good. There's these players in Japan who are really amazing. So the idea of like traveling somewhere to meet somebody on the internet was super bizarre at that time because there were no pictures, you didn't know who they were, you didn't know their real names, you didn't know anything about anybody. But we were cracked out on the action.
The idea of the quest for the best player, that just sort of naturally happened. We all thought we were the very best. I decided that the best way to settle this was to have a tournament, with the goal being really, let's get players together, let's get them to meet each other, exchange ideas, but ultimately also find out like who's really the best.
Here we are, Evolution 2004. It's an exciting moment. Players from around the country and indeed around the world. 33 different countries here.
I think at first we just wanted to be a cool thing that we had for ourselves. Like we were running a cool little event that everyone could find out who the best person in the world is.
That was thrilling, like to watch people get together from different areas. And so they'd send like their best dude or whatever. And you're like, oh, the best dude from like Dunellen, New Jersey is here. And I killed him. That's cool. Okay, so Dunellen is like I own those guys. So it just sort of naturally ramped up from there.
The story of Street Fighter over the last 20 years has really been going from these local scenes and then all the players in these individual pockets finding each other all over the world. So we've gone like from local tournaments to citywide tournaments, to regional tournaments where it's not just players from one state but many states. And then within the last 5 or 6 years, we've started to see regular international competition.
And as we got more traction as the years went on, they were pointing out that we were considered the official big league tournament of the world.
The second year of the EVO tournament, Joey, who had been helping me out, brought on Seth to sort of pick up the slack. And they actually ran the tournament that year. We brought a lot of insight and just a lot of smarts, helped us get things, take it to the next level. That was the first year we were in Vegas.
When it got to Vegas, that was sort of when you could really tell it had arrived. This is, you know, the world of high stakes gambling. This is where men come to play, and we're here to play.
When people scream at EVO and get hype and get crazy, it's because we are all looking at something significant to us. Hype is this unbridled vitality that courses through someone in the moments of suspense and anticipation. You feel all these emotions right before something happens. That's hype. It's that burst of energy from that connection.
We made the move in 2005 to go to Las Vegas, and we haven't looked back, and our attendance keeps doubling year after year, which is the most insane thing I've ever heard of, and players from like 40 countries now come out.
アメリカのトーナメントっていうのはどちらかというと本当に強い人がちゃんと勝ち上がれるシステムを作ってるっていうか例えばダブルエリミネーションっていうルールがあったりその格闘ゲームっていう文化がやっぱり海外に対して日本人がすごい強いんだぞっていうのをアピールできるっていう意味ではそういった海外に向けて発信できる日本の文化としてはストリートファイターっていうのはすごい貢献してるんじゃないかなって思うんですよね。そういう意味で国際交流のきっかけにもなってるんじゃないかなって。
I went to EVO like twice, and I want to go again. I love that. Even if I'm not playing, just to see it. It's like these people dedicated their time, and they're doing the game justice, showing how a true person that masters the game, how he plays for the rest of us.
You just need to like focus on becoming the best, knowing what your flaws are, like watch your old videos on why you lose and take out your bad habits so people can't read you as easily. It takes a lot of dedication and motivation, and like if you really want it that bad, you can achieve it. My parents, for like at least 5 years, they just never knew. They don't know how big it is until like Street Fighter 4 came out, and then the whole GameStop Street Fighter 4 tournament. The winner, they get like this interview, and then you're gonna be on GameStop TV for like a month straight on every GameStop TV, right? Why would my parents ever go to GameStop? They would never go to GameStop. But my cousins will, right? My cousins are the one that told my uncle, and my uncle told the rest of my family. He's like, what's that, Street Fighter? Is that like real fighting? They're like, no, it's a video game. Okay, but I don't want you to get too obsessed with it and stuff like that. But I'm already obsessed with it, obviously, because I'm traveling around the world to tournaments. Well, I guess they were okay with it, but they're not happy about it.
Justin Wong, he has no shame when it comes to playing, which is a good thing. If something is good, he will use it to beat you, and he will keep using it to beat you until you prove that you can stop it.
People make a lot of comparisons to like the Matrix. Like he sees the code. He has his own unique way of seeing the game, where it's not just about doing cool combos and getting in someone's head. It's also about meter management. It's about the clock. It's about the space around the screen. And thinking in these kinds of terms and growing up with the game like he did has made him sort of this sort of legendary genius who can travel across all games sort of freely.
He's just an all-around fantastic player.
My style is more of like it used to be very lame and boring, I'm not gonna lie. Very defensive, the most boring thing you ever see, like I could put you to sleep type of thing. So I decided I want to take like a more offensive route to like please the crowd, if anything, right? And that's why I kind of end up with Rufus, because he's very rushdown oriented and he just likes to just maul people. People don't like to see defense. They like to see all offense. They like to see people get blown up. They like to see people just get like destroyed.
The ironic thing about Justin Wong is that he's such a great player, but some of the most famous and memorable moments in the history of Street Fighter happen at his expense. The most famous is the Daigo parry moment.
When I played him in Third Strike, I was really surprised that it was like really like close, but I guess it's because it's really hard to get in against Chun-Li.
Daigo is known to have said that you don't play to your opponent's weakness, you play to your strength and let him worry about your strengths.
He's not a physically intimidating character, but when you watch him on screen, there's just this immense toughness. He doesn't get shaken.
日本のプレイヤーっていうのはリスクをまず考えてゲームをするんですけど、海外のプレイヤーっていうのはまずリターンを見てから、リスクを考えるっていうプレイヤーが結構多い気がしますね。
Some people will call him sort of like the stoic, sort of Buddha-like character. I think is a complete mischaracterization. He's got that. He's got an inner calm, but he's also just a little bit of a dick.
8年前ですよね。あんまよく覚えてないですけど。
Knows no bounds. Back again, the man, the myth, the legend, the beast, Daigo!
Rare footage of Daigo actually angry.
Daigo doesn't crack, and you just have to beat his super clean style.
He's got like this psychic mentality. He knows what you're gonna do like 4 steps before. Like he should really be a chess champion. But he's also super good at executing anything he tries. So even the super hard combos, he makes them look like they're super easy.
Justin's turtle style. Overcome Rao. Now on the verge of putting Daigo down. 1-0.
I had him with no life, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna just do a super, and he'll be dead.
ただもう狙うしかないなって、そのブロッキングを狙うしかもう勝ち目がないなっていう、もうそれで覚悟を決めてたっていうのは覚えてるんですけど。
And I totally didn't think about the whole parrying aspect at all. Everyone's going crazy in the background, right? I'm like thinking like, oh, maybe he'll mess up. But he doesn't mess up.
うまくいってそれで勝ててあともう特に自分ではやったとかそういう興奮したっていう感じはなかったんですけど、 周りがすごい大騒ぎしてたんで、それにびっくりしたっていうのはよく覚えてます。
Everyone was like, I didn't know that was possible. Like no one knew that was possible. I didn't know that was possible.
When the audience went crazy like that and the video kind of went viral, it was the first time that it all clicked, like this could really work. Like this could happen. Like maybe we could get to the point where this is like we could pack stadiums and watch these games and have everyone get crazy like an athletic sport.
ちょっと前まではそのタイプの差というよりかは、単純にレベルの差がちょっとあるなと、アメリカと日本で差があるなと思ってましたけど、ここほんと数年はその差がほとんどないので、あまり日本とアメリカっていうのの違いを感じないですね。
I love arcades. I grew up on arcades. That was like a second home to me. So it makes me really, really sad that like the arcade scene in America is kind of like dying.
I played in arcades, a lot when I was a kid. It was the thing you would do on a Saturday. Those days are gone, mostly. Arcades have more or less vanished, but thankfully they haven't completely vanished. There are a few arcades still left in the country, and they're healthy. And I think they're healthy now because they're rare. There is something special and unique about arcades. It would be a shame if they went away entirely.
I've been playing Street Fighter competitively for over 15 years. I wanted to be the best at the game. As a youngin, you just strive for new competition. And fortunately enough, I achieved some of those goals. As I got older, real life started kicking in, and I had many jobs. I just wanted to make the quick buck just so I can play games again. I was happy with that for a while, but at the end of the day, gotta make the responsible choice. And I kind of stopped playing as hardcore as I used to, but now these days, I hold events, It's like coming from a player. I never thought I would hold events, and here I am holding events, and I'm presenting it in a way where it's welcoming.
Getting everybody together consistently is key. We get people to be active, to come out instead of just staying at home. Staying at home is really good to support the game, but to support the community, that's another challenge. Making sure that we're giving them a place to play all the time, things to look forward to, getting some sponsors involved to give back to the community, and then some. It's a lot of grassroots work. It's not just one person, it's not just one entity, it's a community. But how did we do it? It's a lot more internet interactivity, with Twitter, Facebook, a structured tournament with ranking battle systems. We got the streams, of course, to give the exposure for all these great players, these hidden talents that now get to show what they're capable of.
Keeping the pressure up here is like stealing a turn kind of from Chris.
I keep dropping those links though. I really wish he would land those. It's going to cost him in the long run.
Right.
He's gotten away with it a couple rounds so far, but eventually it's going to catch up to him because Ken can do so much damage off of your mistakes.
Ooh.
Like that.
Yeah, I just wasn't pressing a button right there.
Yeah, just stop.
Oh, I like the fake.
Oh, I can stay solid.
Not quite going to kill, but it's going to be close, and one more thing is going to do it here.
What's I going to do here? Wake up
Nice.
Bushin. And not much of a choice.
Tonight is our bread and butter night for Wednesday Night Fights. We're featuring Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition 2012 and Street Fighter Cross Tekken.
We're going to have Filipino bus driver versus Black Steel. Filipino bus driver versus Black Steel on station number 2. Please clear the stations, guys.
After everything is set up, stream station is set up, and of course the pool stations, I'm the tournament organizer as well as the bracket runner. So I go on my laptop and I seed the current standings of the players, And as soon as it's time, which it almost is, I'm out there and calling out the names, getting the brackets undergo, posting on Twitter and Facebook, getting the matches on the stream, making sure we're up to speed on where we are in the tournament because we have a lot of viewers watching.
Goes with the raw tag. Monster doesn't get a full punish there. Wow, gets thrown. Position change.
He read that, he didn't push the button.
But he
couldn't tag.
Mike Ross taking the first round again, closing it out. 1 round away now from eliminating Jonathan Burr.
I gotta see where we're at in the bracket, sir, so excuse me.
All right.
Like everything that I've learned from this scene came from an arcade.
Anytime that you can support an arcade, I will always support an arcade. Like consoles are very more convenient, but I will always play an arcade if I had a choice.
Even though our events are in console, we have a lot of other games people can play while they wait, and people, when they lose, we're sitting right next to them, right? You know, they have to feel that. They have to feel that they lost in front of other people to get better. The spirit of the arcade is there.
Everybody says the fighting game community is a community. It is a culture. The people in an arcade are your family, your best friends, and your worst enemy. It's there to drive you to get better. You have to build that, you know?
Watch Ken's meter build up. That's actually probably just as important as watching Ken's life meter drain.
Wow, you know what? I respect the attempt for the reset, but Richard had enough meter to just FADC out. Although now I think about it, he did it strong, so I guess he wasn't even looking for it.
Lots of frame trap attempts, and then he gets the throw in there. Oh, nice!
Oh, the overhead closes it for Richard.
2 overheads in a row.
All we want to do is spread the word for other communities to have some structure. I know at one point, everybody had an arcade or a convenience store with a Street Fighter, and that's nearly extinct these days. It's really hard to find a Street Fighter that is at a public location.
家と家が遠いとか、あとはそのゲームセンターがないということで、その人と対戦をしたい、ゲームをプレイしたいという時に事前に日時を決めたりとか、あと友達同士で連絡取ったりしないと思うように対戦ができないと思うんですよね、アメリカは。それに対して日本はゲームセンターに行けば対戦相手がいますし、家でもその家庭用のオンライン対戦が充実してるんで、そこら辺その日本は気軽に対戦できるけど、アメリカはあらかじめ遊ぶ日を決めとかなきゃいけないっていう違いはかなり大きいなと思います。
I was started as a player because I wanted to be the best, and I want to do the things for me, and I'm sure a lot of top players today have felt the same at one time, but I've matured, and I think there's a lot more to the scene than just yourself.
Capcom invited me to help run an event that they had going on at Comic-Con coming up, and that turned into a job offer. And they were like, Capcom wants to get more involved with the people that play its games. We think this idea of community might be an important avenue for us to explore, and you seem like somebody who's really in touch with a lot of people that play our games. Would you be interested? And I said, no. I love your games and it's all awesome, but I've been training for 10 years to be a professional academic. Like, I'm gonna be a professor. It's flattering, but no. That's when they told me, like, oh, by the way, we just greenlit a game called Street Fighter 4. And I had to think, like, Street Fighter 4. And then they showed me, like, early wireframes, and I was like, wow, that looks really terrible. But it was this opportunity, really, like, the idea that I could be a part of bringing Street Fighter back, and they said, we think you could play a big part in this. And if I turned it down, it was something I would have thought about maybe every single day for the rest of my life, and I didn't want to live that life. And if there's going to be a chance to bring this back and to have it be a force again like it was, I have to be a part of that. I'm not married, and I don't know what it's like exactly to have a wife, but maybe Street Fighter might be my wife. That sounds really sad. It's not just a joyful activity or a way to connect with my friends, but it's also, it's work, it's responsibility, it's missed opportunity, it's achieved opportunities. It's hard to get away from little details to really just enjoy the game playing it. I had sort of a raw play experience with it before, and now it's sort of tied up in all these other areas of professional success and you know, people whose jobs depend on the game, and part of that makes it much more rich, but part of that also takes away from the purity of the experience. It's a really complicated relationship. So my relationship with the community definitely shifted when I moved to Capcom. I felt an extreme sense of responsibility to try and do the best I could. The people that had been waiting, like me, for a decade for a new Street Fighter were some of my closest friends in the world, and I really wanted to not disappoint them.
Seth has brought a real inside perspective about the competitive side of Street Fighter to Capcom, which has been fantastic. Like, he organized the fight clubs where Capcom would basically rent out a space and just bring upcoming titles that aren't released yet for the players to play and get their feedback on.
I think community is not just sort of a separate department or some little box in an organization or something like that. Those are your customers. Those are the people who support you. Those are also the people that make this game really sing. It's the multiplayer. Having those people have a voice at the table in all of our discussions, I feel like is just absolutely the right decision. So I was brought on working on the community side, but also the head of our office, a guy named Mark Beaumont, who has now since passed on, put a lot of faith in me. He put me on reviewing the milestones for the game. So the development team would work on the milestones and I would review them for the US office. At the time, I didn't really understand the gravity of the situation. And there's like, hey, there's this guy from America who's working on one of our core Japanese games. As a Westerner coming to work on what's obviously an icon of Japanese game design, it's a challenge in a lot of ways. There's language barriers, there's cultural barriers, there's you're just somebody new barriers that you'd get anywhere else. All credit to the team. After the initial shock period of like, wait, who is this guy? Like, wait, why? I think they came to understand my own experience and background with Street Fighter is the kind of thing you can't fake. It's not a degree, it's not like a signed piece of paper from some institution. It's years in the trenches. It's tens of thousands of hours spent playing, spent analyzing, spent breaking down every aspect of this game. And so that's the kind of thing that sort of transcends cultural barriers. I feel like the team is pretty smart, and I think all of the things that I complained about, hopefully someday somebody would have, during the course of development, come to the same conclusion on their own, and the fact that I was able to convince them of the things I was able to convince them of suggests that in many ways we're on the same page. We had some heated back and forth about focus attacks and how those could work, but in the long run it was probably really the commitment to 2D collision as far as creating that sort of crisp Street Fighter-y feel. That was probably the most important thing that I was an early advocate about, which is kind of nerdy, but the models moving in 3D looked really cool, but the collision made it feel, to me, more like a Tekken game and less like a Street Fighter game. We did let people play some of those early builds that did have the 3D collision. They couldn't necessarily put their finger on what it was they didn't quite like, but it was like, something doesn't feel right. You know, it was sort of an intangible to them, but I was pretty sure I knew what that intangible was. A 3D collision is a natural fit for 3D models, and I'm not sure it was a bad game, but to me it wasn't a Street Fighter game. And wanted to have that immediacy you get from 2D hitboxes back. So hopefully that served the franchise well. It's a decision we've stood by, and I think we'll continue into the future, no matter what amazing 3D graphics technology the future may hold.
There's no question that Seth has helped reinvigorate Street Fighter. I've seen how the Capcom games have really blossomed, and a large part of that is due to not just Seth's knowledge, deep knowledge about what makes a competitive game fun, but also the outreach he's done with the players. The designers at Capcom are brilliant and they make fantastic games, but they're only so many people. And through Seth's efforts, like thousands of more people have played these games in advance and given the team valuable feedback. And that's something that just did not happen in the old days.
At the end of the Street Fighter 4 project, the team ended up giving me the credit of special advisor, sort of in recognition that the role had encompassed a lot of different aspects that frankly didn't really have a precedent at the company. The real mission to me was to make the world understand what I knew. Fighting games overall, but Street Fighter in particular, is just made of this raw kind of magic. Like there's something so genius at the core of this game, and I know it, and I know I'm not, just crazy, because I found these people around the country, around the world, who I have nothing in common with, who found the same thing. The chance to sort of remind the world about the magic of fighting games and get them excited about it again, and to bring fighting games back, not just as a genre, but as a cultural force. It's really been more than I ever could have asked.
でましてや一つのプロジェクトを25年間も続けるということは非常に大変なことじゃないですか。それは我々じゃなくって、ストリートファイターの1を作った我々じゃなくって、カプコンのスタッフが代々それを継承して、ちゃんとメジャーなタイトルにして25年も引っ張ってきたっていうことに対してすごく僕は敬意を表します。
もちろんもうここまで、盛り上げていただいたファンの皆さんであったりとか、もうこのビデオを見てる皆さんもそうなんですけども、僕たちとしてはやはりこのストリートファイターっていうもの、そしてファイティングゲームじゃなくてファイティングツールっていうものをですね、よりもっと多くの人に定着させていきたいので、一番大きいことはさらにもう一つナンバリングをですね、早く上げて新しいストリートファイターの世界をですね、皆さんに見せてあげたいっていうのは非常に思っています。でそれをぜひ新しい、そのスタッフ、そして新しいファンの皆さんとですね、盛り上げていきたいなとは思っています。
で個人的に言うとストリートファイターがなかったら僕はこの業界にさえ多分いなくて、それぐらい個人的には僕の人生にも影響を与えているというところは言えると思いますけど。
ゲームの歴史ってまだ浅いですけど、ゲームの歴史の中でやっぱり僕は最も印象深いのはストリートファイター2なんですけども、ストリートファイターがなければ違う感じのゲームになってたんじゃないですかね、バーチャファイターは。
Street Fighter is almost kind of like this weird universal language, and I feel like it's kind of united a lot of people around the world. We have scenes in Singapore, we have scenes in, in China and in Japan and Europe, and Kuwait has this amazing fighting game scene. I wonder if there was no Street Fighter, would we have a game that's like that?
ストリートファイターがなかったとしたら、多分僕はそのゲームに関わってるっていうこと自体がもうなかったんじゃないかなと思いますね。
Street Fighter is probably the sole reason why fighting games even exist to this day. I can't even imagine any fighting games without Street Fighter.
First of all, I don't think the games would be that great. Okay, Street Fighter is the top dog.
I honestly don't know what the world would look like without Street Fighter. I mean, this entire room wouldn't even be here if it weren't for Street Fighter, but it's played such a big part of my life. I've met a lot of friends because of this game. And a couple of years ago, I was telling one of my best friends that I would really, really like to find an awesome Sakura cosplayer to take photos with. And so I went to this convention, and that's where I met the love of my life. If it weren't for Ryu and Sakura, we would have never spoken to each other.
Street Fighter teaches people to be self-improving. The concept of never giving up. Whenever you lose at Street Fighter, you have the option to continue. If you have time and you're enjoying the game, you'll press start and you'll try again until you get better.
このゲームの歴史の中で最も重要かつ歴史上本当に燦然と輝く名作であり、巨人っていう言い方するんだけど、巨人のゲームっていう言い方僕はしてたんだけど、一番重要なゲームの歴史の中で最も重要なファイティングゲームだと僕は思っている。2番目に重要なのはバーチャファイタ
ーでここから我々がやらないといけないことが、さっきも例に出しましたようにチェスであったり囲碁であったり将棋みたいに歴史の風雪に負けない、 ずっとやり続けることができるようなそういうなんていうんですか100年も200年も続くようなゲームに仕上げていかないといけないと思うんですけどね。
There's been so many games that try to make a carbon copy and change a couple of things. They're copying enough to be close enough to Street Fighter, but the fact that they aren't exactly it never goes anywhere.
It doesn't work. This is gonna sound really cliche, but if there was anything to change about Street Fighter, I wouldn't change anything. It's like the universe. We're the length of a pin away, the earth burns or freezes, or we couldn't support life. It's a really, drastic comparison. I'm not arrogant enough to think that I could think of one thing that could be changed for the better.
I really feel like Street Fighter is like a perfect game. Perfect.
Street Fighters turning terrorist? That's ridiculous. There's no way he can ever become a criminal. Ken is not a terrorist.
I'll let Ryu and Ken fulfill their destinies by staging the fight they've been longing for.
Ryu, I'm getting tired of waiting.
Tiger uppercut!